Do you ever feel like there are things that just aren't for you? Topics or concepts that you'll never understand, as if they're just not meant for you to know, and seem so far away in terms of being in the realm of something that you're gonna be able to grasp that you just decide it's not your thing? I'll give you an example. For me, it's directions. I'm one of those people that if you ask me where some big road is that everyone seems to know, I just don't. You can tell me over and over again, and I can try and grasp north versus south, but it just doesn't stick for me. It's just something that I never seem to get right. So I've decided that I'm just not a directions guy. That'll never be my thing. But that doesn't actually have to be true at all. I could figure out directions if I really wanted to. Like, sure, it might not be the thing that comes naturally to me, but I could spend the time to sit down and dedicate some time to actually figuring it out. And it probably wouldn't even end up being that hard. This is exactly what happens when it comes to investing, or even just money in general, for what feels like a lot of people. They feel like investing is this complicated subject that's gonna take a lot of time to understand, and since it involves money and potentially losing that money, they just don't trust that they're gonna actually ever understand it better than the experts. So why bother figuring out in the first place for themselves? Or even worse, why bother investing at all? I'll just put that into the future and figure it out later. The truth is that empowering yourself with information about investing doesn't have to be that complicated or happen all at once. It can be slow, over time, and feel really good. And that's exactly how I've done it. I think that when people think about investing, there's this resistance that comes from that lack of confidence and knowledge. And you hear people saying all the time that you gotta live in the now, you gotta have fun when you're young. There was even that huge TikTok trend going around that was talking about how you'll always make the money back, or you'll always have more money in the future, but you'll never get this moment back in your life when you're in your 20s and experiencing whatever adventure you're on in the moment. But the problem is that statements like that sometimes can become your own personal excuse from actually diving into the unknown. Like, if I think back to my mindset at 22 years old when I was fresh out of university, I acted like the reason that I wasn't prioritizing investing or just being good with my money at all at that time was because I only do the transition from university to this like real life one time, right? I wanted to soak it in and have all the cool experiences that I could. And I definitely don't regret making sure I did all of those things in terms of the stuff I was able to experience. But did I actually have to put off growing my knowledge and also empowering myself with money in order to do all that stuff? No, I definitely didn't. One of the best things that I've taken away personally from this YouTube channel and getting to talk about money all the time is that I've learned so much myself over time. And that's really the key to what we're talking about right now, the over time piece. I didn't learn everything there is to know overnight, and I haven't just, exactly nailed down how I want to handle my money for the rest of my life, but I'm able to learn a little bit, then take some steps, change up what I'm learning, then change up what I'm doing, and continue to do that over time. But you have to get going and make yourself just get started.
Now, once people finally get over that first big step and actually decide to learn more about investing, it's really, really easy to learn a few misconceptions that are just out there everywhere. We've talked before about how millions and millions of people started investing for the first time back in 2020, so during the pandemic. And even though it was awesome that all these people realized that they didn't have to invest all their money with the big banks, who will basically just sales pitch you into buying mutual funds with high fees just so they can make a lot of money, even though active funds perform worse than passive funds 90% of the time, they kind of went in the other direction of thinking that you have to invest in risky single stocks. Now, we did this one video at the very beginning of the year where we basically talked about how after investing in single stocks for a year, we just didn't think it was the best use of our money, right? Like, at least not if we're investing for the long term towards retirement. The ability to invest in diversified funds like index funds and ETFs is just awesome and less volatile. And to be honest with you, it's probably how you're gonna be able to get those stronger average returns over time. And it's one of those things where it's one of those big lessons where it's just not one of the first things you'll hear online. The other big misconception is something that me and Steph talk about all the time, and that's because it bothers us that you don't get this information when you do a quick look into investing. Risk level should be based on age and education and not how comfortable you are with risk. Overall, the younger you are equals more time to invest in the stock market, which equals higher risk level. Then you adjust over time as you get closer and closer to retirement, and you literally just can't afford to have your account going up and down so much. If people know this and are taught to not emotionally invest or pull their money out whenever the markets go down, then that's the ideal way to do it. Anyways, those are definitely some big lessons that have been ingrained in us and have really caused us to change our thoughts on investing over time. And I gotta say, Steph's the one who's really tested out a bunch of different styles on investing, especially over the last 4 years.
Okay, so here's a quick timeline of what my investing journey's looked like so far with all of those different styles so that I can tell you what's changing and how I'm feeling now. I started out investing in mutual funds with TD Bank, only $25 a month, very low risk level, didn't know what I was doing. Then eventually I realized after I started budgeting and actually understanding how much money I brought in and kept every single month that I could afford to invest more than $25 a month. Now, around the same time that I realized that, I also realized that you don't need an actual big physical bank or a financial advisor to invest. You can invest in your own, keep more of your money back because you're not paying those high fees, and end up actually making more. So after that realization, I switched to TDE series, which basically just means that I transferred my investments into index funds that I bought myself and also rebalanced for myself online. I did that for a bit until again realizing that I wanted to have even more control of my portfolio. Now at this time, I still wasn't ready to do everything by myself, but I did want to be able to go into my portfolio at any time, look at it myself and understand what was going on. And I also wanted to again pay less money in fees. Now these realizations so far were really huge for me because as I was becoming more knowledgeable about investing, I knew I still didn't know everything I had to know yet and wasn't quite able to do it for myself in my mind, but I did know and did learn that I had the ability to invest for myself and also pay less in fees. I learned that for the average beginner investor, I didn't need to be paying so much money to this company that was actually more focused on just selling me something that made them more money than they were actually focused on giving me higher returns. This is when I started using Wealthsimple's Robo-Advisor, and we have a ton of videos up on this channel about that portfolio and how it works, so if you want to check it out, we'll make sure we link one of them up here for you. But for me, the biggest lesson that I learned when switching to using the Robo-Advisor was about risk level, kind of like what Den was talking about earlier. So for me, what I ended up doing is moving my risk level up to the most risky possible option because I'm young and I want to be able to get the highest possible return on my investments over time. And now somehow it's been 4 years, 3 different investing techniques, 2 years with the Robo-Advisor specifically, and I've also contributed $33,000 into my investment accounts. And on top of all of that, my most recent lesson learned has been understanding the specific ETFs that my Robo-Advisor invests in for me. Now, what I've learned by looking into those ETFs is that I have a lot of global diversification. And that's not inherently a bad thing, but I also know that I'm comfortable with less global diversification because I'm young and I want to have a little bit more of a risk-reward relationship there. So what does that mean for me in my investments?
Well, the answer to that question is that she might start investing in a similar way to me. So investing in her own ETFs as opposed to continuing on with the Robo-Advisor. So right now I invest in one ETF, or in other words, a one fund solution called XCQT. And now for Steph, she's not necessarily planning on investing in this specific ETF, but she is leaning more towards actually selecting her own ETF or a group of ETFs that gives her more exposure to the US market. So right now, as her portfolio sits, she's got 32% of her money invested in US equities and then 68% everywhere else. So if she was to go about this route, like, she would then potentially actually stop contributing to her Robo-Advisor and start buying up her own funds. Now, what's interesting, especially right now, given the fact that the market is just so drastically low, is that her plan wouldn't be to take those investments, sell them, and then put them back into different funds. If she were to do that, as her account sits right now, the value of her account is actually lower than the amount of money that she's contributed, right? So if she was to just let those investments sit there, eventually they are gonna rise back up over time. And in the future, once they are back up, right, then she could make the decision of actually selling them and doing that process, or not. Overall, I really think the key here is understanding that you can change how you're investing over time as you're learning more about your own personal philosophy on money and life. And listen, like, you can do all of this while you're still living and experiencing life. I would say, actually, I would say that it's even better if you're looking out for future you and you're planning for future you while at the same time, you're still allocating some of that money and that time for living in the moment and living in the now. When I look back on my 20s in a few decades, I want to be able to say that I took risks and opportunities with my life path and my career. I want to be able to say that I had all these great and exciting memories that were both fun and exciting once again, but I also want to be able to say that I set future me up for success when it came to money at the exact same time. Achieving the sense of balance is what I'm striving to do. Now we want to know how you've changed your thoughts on investing or money in general as you've learned more and just grown more. Let's talk about it in the comments below, and before you do that, make sure you like down below. It really does help us out a ton, and also, of course, make sure you subscribe. Also, if you didn't hear Steph say it last week, we've got some really exciting news and just like exciting things that we're doing with the channel. We've got some great videos coming soon, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. We've had a lot in the works over the last couple of weeks. I know we've made a lot of big changes, but we're super excited in the direction that we're heading in. And of course, if you haven't seen any of our previous videos, make sure you check them out next door. We will be back. You know the vibes. Let's go.